Hello friends, Anderson here, and today I would like to build a world with you using Worlds Without Number, a system, an RPG system, but also a world building system that is free. At least most of it is. There is a paid version that has a bit more meat to the bone, but everything we use to build the world is contained in the free version. So if you're interested in this, and if you want to use it as a tool for your own solo adventures, because the world building we do now is for a solo adventure, we will be adventuring in the world we create using Scarlet Heroes, which happens to be from the same publisher and the same author as Worlds Without Number. So everything you need to build a world is in there in the free version. So if you want to spice up your solo background building, then have a look. If you can, then support the author and get the paid version. And if you want to have a look first, then go get the free version. I've had a look through it, and I have already prepared, well, as an analogy to Ironsworn, I guess, a world building workbook. So all the prompts and the structure that we will be following are here with a little bit of real estate for each individual point, so we can take some notes so we don't forget what we build here. And overall, it is an approach where you start building your world with a few ground rules in broad strokes, go down to the region that your campaign will start in or will be set in, and then go even further down to your nation/kingdom level, which makes sense to me. I do have a drift regarding the direction I would like the setting to take, specifically on the nation level, because I have an idea in my head that I'd like to play a thief type of character, or maybe like a wandering adventurer, sellsword thief, going with like the regular sword and sorcery trope, I suppose. And since Scarlet Heroes is a sword and sorcery type of game, and what I would like to build it in is mostly like urban adventure, at least to begin with. That's where a thief generally belongs. So I would like to, on the nation level, introduce the nation as like a enormous fantasy mega city, which means that the region we'll be building is the surroundings of an enormous fantasy megacity. So that is sort of the direction that I'd like to take. What I don't know is just about everything else. I have some ideas about the nature of the city. I'd like it to be somewhat infamous, ungovernable almost, but that doesn't mean that this will turn out that way. It might as well be that we have Ankh-Morpork and the patrician is in full control. It just doesn't look like it. But in the end, I do know that I want it to be not the seat or the belongings of a single nation. I want it to be a melting pot, like a enormous metropolis that combines cultures from everywhere in this world we're building, which is also the reason why I'd like to know a bit more about the rest of the world and not just build the city. And well, that's about it really. What we need, of course, is then to fathom with the world building tools we have why this city exists, where it is, and why all the nations seem to have a stake in it and why it remains independent. These are all things that I'd like to establish as a sort of a framework for the Worlds Without Numbers generator. But these are the things I think I already know about the city. I'd like to think so, but it may well be that the tables teach me differently. The structure that we're going to follow is building your backdrop, which is on page 117 of both versions of the rulebook, as far as I know, and it comes with some general instructions, the first of which is to name your world. And this is where we run into perhaps one of the quirks of Worlds Without Number. It doesn't generally supply you with instruments to generate names. It comes with a suggestion framework, unless I haven't found it, but I don't think there are tables for it, at least not the way that other solo tools have. It does come with a suggestion for linguistic framing, so especially when it comes to your nation building, to take the linguistic theme off of like a dead language, real world language, or some obscure language that none of the players speak. That is a possibility, but I also do like my random generation, and I think we can meet somewhere in the middle, because this is something that a Dungeon World supplement does already. It takes some real world languages and generates from that, well, some less spoken, I would say, real world languages, and takes from that a set of tables. I think that's also where me, myself, and I got Arnkalapuki from, and I think it's called the Perilous Wilds in English. I have Verhängnisvolle Weiten, the German version. Don't ask why. And so for these names and things to supply general ideas there, I will just dive into supplements that have tables like this, like the Books of Random Tables. I have several, and this supplement. So let us think of a touch point here that we can take to roll up a world name, maybe to pay homage to Arnkalapuki. We'll go with the table that he was born from and roll on that. That is a 0-6, and since we're picking a name for a world, I don't really know if I go male or female. I'll just pick whatever I like better. I think Aina would be nice. So our world is called Aina. We're not really rolling dice with immediate character impact, so I'm going to be a bit loosey-goosey here and go by general preference of flavor as well, so we get a bit more cohesive setting. And yes, I realize that I started the World Without Number video by rolling on a Dungeon World table first and foremost, but I can promise you that we will be doing a lot of work in Worlds Without Numbers too. It's just the name thing is a bit of an issue that I don't want to come up with a bunch of names on the fly here, and I don't want to sit in front of a screen and click my way through random numbers generators. I want to do pen and paper, and I do have a lot of paper here, so I'll use it. In any case, the world Aina. The next question is, are natural physical laws mostly the same as in our world? I think that's a clear yes, because honestly, anything that isn't a yes on this front is liable to break my brain. I'm not particularly great with imagining different alternative forces of nature, natural laws, so I'm not going to go with that. Spirit worlds and parallel realities. Are there any spirit worlds, alternate dimensions, novel planes of existence, or other cosmological locales generally associated with the world? That's definitely a yes. We don't need to think about gods just yet, but we need to figure out whether there are heavens and hells and Chthonian realms and whatever else there is. The dream, the nightmare, as we just touched on in Ironsworn. So I would say yes. The question is, are there many? Are there few? I think we can narrow it down to two options. Either we have like a very rigid set of strict cosmology where there is a heaven and a demonic plane and maybe a plane of chaos, but there isn't like a myriad of different planes of existence, or we have the exact opposite. We have complete and utter chaos. I think we just roll for it, 51 plus. We have utter chaos and many, many planes of existence, and anything below is we have a set, strict cosmology. That would appear to be an 88, which means utter chaos. There are many, many planes of existence. So this opens up options, for instance, now as the setting also encourages more a local approach to gods, so kingdom and region specific gods. Probably then that also indicates that every run-of-the-mill god somewhere in this world has their own plane of existence. Imagining something like the Elder Scrolls Oblivion planes or something like this, and all other kinds of realms that exist there, which I like. Are there any grand global scale empires or groups that impinge on the campaign's scope? If so, give them a name and 2 sentences of description at this point. I think I'll take this to the dice again. So let's say if we go 51 plus, we have some world-spanning powers, which implies also maybe some either status of this city as an implicit protectorate, where there is like 2 powers vying for it and being played off against each other, and therefore none of them wins. Or maybe there's even like a hostile takeover where there's an empire, sort of like the Nilfgaardians, constantly trying to take over this free city of multitudes that we're building here. 51 plus, there are empires, or there is an empire, there are world-spanning powers. 50 below, there is no such thing. 86, there are empires, or large-scale global groups. Could also be some kind of global conspiracy. Why not both? So we could go with global spanning empire or with global spanning empires/groups that are vying for power. So the question is, do we have multiples or do we just have one? I think again 51 plus we have multiples, 50 below we have only one monolithic empire. That is a 98. That's about as high as it goes on the yes, there are many. So maybe there really are many. Let's make it 2 superpowers and maybe 1 or 2 clandestine cabals of world-controlling conspirators or demigods or whatever we can think of eventually when it maybe becomes an intersector with our story. Let's leave it at 1. So 2 superpowers and 1 cabal. Now we need to define them somehow. Fortunately, we have tables for this, for nations. We also have a table for thematic elements of nations. So I think that's what I want to do first. I want to establish a theme for the superpowers. So the theme for superpower 1, we roll a d20. The first is a 20, which is unity, where purposes are shared. So we have 1 nation of unity, and the other is... That is a... Oops, that was a 2. I just tried to drag it a bit closer so I can see it. Decadence. Of sins and fadings. Decadence. So maybe we have 1 united empire or confederacy of smaller nations that see unity as their strength and that build on that unity whenever a threat arises. And we have 1 decadent empire that is maybe bringing to mind like more a declining empire, or one where the focus, or very hedonistic one, where the focus of life is to push the boundaries and relish in decadence and things like that. Decadence here is defined as the nation is voluptuously cruel, indulgent, and indifferent to the prices it pays for its pleasures. Unspeakable debaucheries and sordid delights are in common circulation. So that sounds like a very nice evil empire kind of theme. And unity, powers and groups within the nation are highly united in their goals and sense of fellow feeling. While not necessarily xenophobic, they will tend to value their brethren more than strangers and paper over internal conflicts and disagreements that might fester into civil disorder. So very open to interpretation what we can build with this, I think. There's also a tool here to give us some more ideas on the nation's national problems and good things happening now and positive ties with neighboring states and disputes with neighboring states. So that is an option we have, but for now I think we need to define the 2 large empires. For unity, I think, I don't know why, maybe because of the aspect of, because it's almost like a contradiction, because I'm thinking of something that is not actually in itself a united entity. I'm thinking more of a confederacy of kingdoms, smaller kingdoms that banded together maybe to stave off this decadent evil empire, and that forged a bond, not quite like the northern kingdoms in The Witcher or anything like that, because they're not as tightly bound, but like a set of like-minded rulers that have found not only necessity in this unity, but they've bought into this benefit so much that they now formed an empire and maybe elect an emperor tier ruler every decade or so. That I think we can describe. So we have a confederacy of smaller kingdoms that arose to stave off the trepidations of the Decadent Empire, which also implies that the Decadent Empire is older. And the Decadent Empire is a fiendish civilization, rotten to the core, which seeks to use the rest of the world as a resource for its pleasures. Not bad. And then, of course, we have our cabal, our secret society. I think we can use the malevolent cult table here just to give ourselves a hint of what they want to accomplish, who this cabal is, this world-spanning cabal, which means we need a d4, a d6, 10, 8, 12, and so on, 20. We need all of them dice, and we roll once to establish what our cabal is like. Okay, we start from the top. We have a 3 on the d4, which means that in terms of unity, it is tenuously balanced factions cooperate. So it is a fractured cabal. The d6, what general goal do they have, is a 6. They want to obtain secular control over an area. In this case, the area would be the world that seeks to control this secular world. So we also have a religious aspect for sure in this cult, because it is a cult, so they do this for some kind of religious gain or deity, and they want to control the world. What is so horrible about the faith? That's a d8, that's a 6. Secular civilization must be destroyed. They want to control the secular world to destroy it. Maybe then like destroy the world to rebuild it, or destroy the world in some ginormous ritual to reawaken their god, or rebuild it in his image. How do the clergy enforce their will? That's the d10. That's an 8. The dark god's divine wrath smites them. Oh god. That controls its members through dark clerical magic. That sounds like it's like they're administrating them to death, honestly. The magic of dark clerics, not... anyway. And what problems does it have? That's a 1. The leadership is insane in unhelpful ways. The leaders are insane by human standards. And a specific trait to the cult is 11. A subculture of the land is friendly to it. Okay, so they already have allies all over the world. We need to upscale this a bit from a regional cult, but now we have our 3 grand scale global empires or groups. We have the Unity Empire, which is a confederacy of smaller kingdoms that rose to stave off the trepidations. No, is it trepidation? Is it? Oh god, my English failed me. I wanted to say depredation, not trepidation. The depredation of the Decadent Empire, and the Decadent Empire is a fiendish civilization rotten to the core that seeks to use the rest of the world as a resource for its pleasure. And our cult we just described as this fractured, insane leader destroy the world by first conquering it and then using it as fuel to reawaken the dark god and rebuild the world in its image. And the dark god is already working through the clergy to enforce the will of the cult. And it has allies all over the show. Interesting. So we have our grand scale movers and shakers. Let's have a look at the next point. How interconnected are parts of your world? Is it easy to move from one region to another? Do the natives know a lot about their more distant neighbors? Interconnectedness, I think our mega city is a trade hub and thus very connected and somewhat savvy in the ways of other cultures. The world in general, I think, ranges from isolated barbarians and demi-humans to medieval tier civilizations like this Unity Kingdom to maybe the Empire of Decadence, where it is not as easy to travel because there's probably also an aspect of servitude, indentured servitude, slavery, and all those horrible things. But in general, I think there is a lot of travel, a lot of cultural exchange, and I really want this city also to be some kind of teeming metropolis of many cultures and peoples. Which brings us to recent global events. Are there any vast global events that have happened recently? We have a history table here that we can use for this question, but it is also about recent historical events. So we're not building the entire world history. We are invited to build some more historical events as we narrow it down to the regional and to the local level. So we will flesh out the history there through the specific lens of the area that we're describing. But for the world events, the question is really, are there any cataclysmic recent events that have shaped how the world is at this very moment? So still in recent memory, still with probably people living that have experienced them. I think yes, because no would not be quite as interesting. We can, however, put it to the dice. So I want to embrace the randomness in this in this whole Scarlet Heroes series and Worldbuilding series. So 51 plus, yes, there was a cataclysmic event. Let's see. We're getting a 97. So yes, there is a historical crises table, and I think that's what we should roll on. That's a percentage dice. So let's do that. 85, that gives us unsuccessful expansion. I think we can maybe construe this as that the Decadent Empire unsuccessfully tried to expand and was stopped by the Unity Empire. We'll give them names eventually, but for now I think we don't really need that yet. We can even roll a die 10 on the how did they overcome the crisis specifically, so let's check in on that. 2. I love it when the dice confirm the story I just already told. Organization and Unity overcome the trouble. So through organization and unity. That of course means that the Empire of Unity is a very recent thing that only came about through the threat of the Decadent Empire and its expansionist attitude, and that the Empire of Unity is only as old as recent memory. And it was united by, let's build up some kind of unifier figure that the Empire of Unity holds in almost religious regard. Let's roll a percentage die again on the table in the Dungeon World supplement, the Perilous Wilds, I think. And also a d6, 1 to 3, it's a male identifying person, and 4 to 6, it's a female identifying person. So we have those two options here in the table. That's a 17 and a 5. That's a female name, and the name is Ilona. So whoever Ilona was, she became the Empress. Let's give Ilona a last name as well. Let's just go to a different table and roll up another name. Ilona Geza. That has a kind of a ring to it. Okay, so Ilona Geza unified some decades ago the Empire of Unity out of various smaller kingdoms. Maybe some kind of Jeanne d'Arc figure, like a peasant enlightened by some divine spirit, and then somehow manages to channel that into forming this empire, and is now regarded almost like a saint, almost like Saint Alessia in the Elder Scrolls maybe as well. How many historical events do we need? I think we need only this one for now. So that puts us in a pretty good spot with our history and our natural laws and the spirit worlds and the grand scale of things in the world of Aina. And I think that may be also enough for one episode of the world building. So I will transition out from the world and into the regional level in the next episode. Until then, I thank you very much for watching. I'll catch you next time, and bye for now.